everybody. It is wonderful to see familiar names, if not faces, and some faces today. I'm April Mendez with Greenprint Partners. As Barbara said, Greenprint has been a close partner and friend to the Exchange for many years and with many of you. And it's just so wonderful to be back with you all. For those who are not yet members of the Exchange or who haven't attended the annual meeting, I personally consider it kind of the Mardi Gras of the green infrastructure field. So it is absolutely worth both joining and certainly in participating in the annual meeting and accessing all of those phenomenal resources. The exchange is the well that I think we all have available to draw from as green infrastructure practitioners who are seeking to deepen our own ability to practice green infrastructure, to see the trends of what's happening in green infrastructure across the US and Canada, and to find connection in people who are dealing with similar challenges and also have a similar sense of kind of mission and spirit. So this has just been such a life-giving community for me personally, for us at Greenprint, and I highly encourage folks who are not yet members to join up. So. I'm excited to share a bit with you today on one of my favorite topics. And I think you're pulling up our slides here. Great, which is how to scale green infrastructure through places of worship, parks, and schools. And personally, for me, this is one of my favorite topics because it's working with these kinds of mission-driven properties that really offers an opportunity to produce outsized impact for the communities that need it most, and a really fun opportunity to work with, honestly, some of the most passionate people in our cities, people who are already dedicated to improving their communities and have made that kind of a lifelong dedication, and properties that endure in the kind of impact that they're having, that they're anchoring within our neighborhoods. So this work is not easy or always successful, but it's certainly worth it, and it's a lot of fun. And this area is actually where Greenprint got our start in doing the work that we do, which is centering community in stormwater mitigation work, specifically around green stormwater infrastructure. Back in 2016 or so, we started supporting stormwater agencies in St. Louis and Philadelphia, and eventually San Francisco as well, who were rolling out green infrastructure grant programs to get private properties on board with retrofitting their facilities for GSI. And we're struggling a bit to be able to reach and successfully partner with these kinds of mission-driven organizations, in large part because they didn't really have the capacity or either the technical capacity or the financial capacity or just the time capacity to pursue these opportunities and deliver on them. And so we partnered with the Kresge Foundation to bring in some funding to design a program model that would work particularly well with these property owners and provide white glove support all the way through, from learning about the opportunity and what green stormwater infrastructure is, to applying for the funds to be able to do this work on their sites, to then actually doing all of the design and construction, and then finally the kind of handoff to the long-term maintenance work that needed to be done. So our team is really excited to be able to share some of that expertise with you all today, and also to engage your expertise in some of the small group conversations. And you'll have opportunity also, if you have insights to share, to be able to elevate those in the panel discussion that we're going to have later on today. So if we go to the next slide, here's our plan for today. We're going to run you through why you might consider focusing on these properties, and then for each type of property, the specific opportunities, barriers, and places to get started with those properties. And then we'll move into some time in small groups for you to connect with one another on your own experiences, and or looking at possibilities for working with these properties in your own jurisdictions. And then we'll come back together for a larger group discussion of both the insights that are bubbling up from you all and questions that are coming up that we can help address. And then if we go to the next slide, we've got a couple of learning objectives for you all today. Our intent is that you'll walk away today with a stronger understanding of why parks, schools, and places of worship are high value partners and why each of them brings something distinct to the table. You'll walk away with a stronger understanding of the co-benefits of engaging with these property types, from improved community health and environmental education to building stronger public trust and ratepayer support for the work that you're going to be doing into the future. And then finally, you'll gain some strategies for developing partnerships at a programmatic scale. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to our first Greenprint speaker, Jim Sparber, who will talk about why private property is important as a focus for GSI programs right now.
Thank you, April. Can you go to the next slide, please? So why private property GSI now? As a starting point, we decided to take a look back at the State of the Field report that was published by the Exchange in 2022. That report overwhelmingly identified regulation as the primary driver of green infrastructure. And as we all know, the Clean Water Act is the overarching regulation. In order to achieve the Clean Water Act objectives, the regulatory community has been pushing down discharge limits on wastewater treatment plants to the point where their allowable pollutant discharge concentrations are reaching the limits of what's technologically feasible without being prohibitively expensive. So, if you're a regulator charged with achieving the goals of the Clean Water Act, where do you go from here? One option would be to increase the effectiveness of stormwater control measures on urban runoff. So I think that's kind of where we're at in a regulatory world. We've had the good fortune to work all across the country, and I can say that the Clean Water Act, when translated into regulation at the local level, varies widely from one area of the country to another. In CSO areas, GSI is typically one part of a solution that's driven primarily by the desire to reduce stormwater volume and peak flows, reducing CSO events. In these areas, capture of runoff before it enters into the combined sewer drives project selection. And stormwater in CSO areas, it has to be intercepted before it reaches the point of combination with wastewater flows. So unless you undertake a full sewer separation project, it becomes necessary to intercept and manage flows on private properties. In MS4 areas, the requirements of regulation can vary widely as well. In some parts of the country, notably here in the Midwest, the requirements for MS4s tend to be the 6 minimum control measures and not a whole lot more. Whereas in other parts of the country, MS4 permit requirements have become much more extensive, requiring watershed restoration plans, active steps towards achieving the goals set out in those plans. So we're starting to see more regulatory requirements across the country that are, in essence, pushing stormwater management onto private and publicly owned parcels. A couple of examples. In King County, Washington, their MS4 permit requires them to develop a stormwater management action plan. And as part of that plan, a stormwater management for existing development, or SMED, SMED, it must be developed. The SMED outlines specific projects to either retrofit or enhance stormwater management from existing facilities. One of the challenges in developing this type of plan in dense urban areas is the lack of available public lands for the construction of stormwater management facilities. Public land is estimated to be 30 to 40% of the total urban land area, but the majority of that land is held in public right-of-way. The right-of-way corridors are difficult to use for stormwater due to other competing uses such as traffic and utilities, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with those challenges. So that leaves private parcels and publicly owned parcels as places where stormwater management impacts can be made. Another example of private property retrofits is in the state of Vermont. It's not specifically administered under the MS4 provisions, but through the state legislature where they enacted the 3-acre rule. So this required all properties with 3 or more acres of impervious area to treat their runoff to current day standards. So this law initially went into effect in 2022, and it requires properties draining to Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog, which have TMDLs for phosphorus. They have to complete stormwater retrofits and become compliant with current stormwater treatment standards by October 1st of 2028. So looking at these trends that we see in the regulatory community and understanding that further reduction of nutrients from wastewater treatment is becoming technologically difficult and cost prohibitive, I'm guessing that at some point we're all going to be seeing some form of retrofitting existing infrastructure with stormwater management as a regulatory requirement. So other factors that are driving GSI based on the state of the field report include flood resilience and aging infrastructure and community quality of life. In the context of the state of the field report, I believe that the flood resilience was intended to relate to localized flooding in urban areas due to restricted capacity of conveyance systems rather than riverine flooding. In a related fashion, aging infrastructure related to systems which are undersized for the intense storms that were now occurring at a higher frequency due to climate change were identified as a driver of GSI. In both of these instances, GSI implementation is used to reduce peak flows, thereby reducing the strain on aging and undersized infrastructure systems. So community quality of life was also identified as one of the top driving factors for GSI implementation. And GSI has the ability to deliver not only the desired outcomes related to stormwater management, but also the ability to provide many co-benefits to the surrounding community. I think the folks in this webinar are well versed in the co-benefits that GSI can bring, and we'll talk about some of those benefits that GSI brings to schools, parks, and places of worship in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Okay, so this graphic shows what respondents to the State of the Field survey in 2022 felt would be their priorities for moving stormwater programs forward between 2022 and 2027, that 5-year period. 56% of respondents said they would be increasing private property retrofits, and churches would be in that group. And 61% said that they would be increasing work in public parcel retrofits, and work on schools and parks would fall under that category. We're closing in on 2027 pretty quickly here, so I'm curious to understand where we are at as an industry compared to where we thought we were going back in 2022. Next slide, please, Aya. So in 2022, although over 50% of respondents to the survey thought they would be increasing investments in private and public parcel retrofits, the surveyed community also recognized that there were significant barriers to implementation. The two most significant barriers were the inability to provide funding and the limited opportunities due to high urban density. It's that second barrier that we're going to be talking about today. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so how do we make non-residential retrofits more effective? So we feel like we need to be doing more of them. How do we make it more effective? How do we get more impact? The strategy we'll be talking about today is to develop GSI at multiple sites under the control of one organization. So one school district, one park district, one church organization. The ability to work with one set of decision makers means that you only need to educate the group about GSI and the program one time. The education process can be lengthy and require significant effort. You also only need to negotiate the terms in an agreement one time. And in general, you can learn the needs, the preferences, the desires of an organization and apply them multiple times, decreasing the learning curve with each project. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so why are we looking specifically at these three types of projects or properties for projects? Next slide, please. So we put together a matrix, put together a matrix of the considerations when looking at property types to engage with around stormwater retrofits. So some of the considerations would be the impervious concentration. This is an important factor, particularly when you're working in a CSO and need to intercept flows before they reach a combined sewer system. So schools and places of worship generally have large impervious areas, parking lot surfaces typically. and then provide a good opportunity to collect stormwater before it enters a combined sewer system. The second thing that we look at, subsurface conditions. As we discussed previously, the right-of-way tends to be packed with utilities, leaving very little room for best management practices. Conversely, schools, parks, and places of worship typically only have utilities that serve the buildings that are on the site. So it leaves a lot more space available for BMPs, and all three of these types of properties meet that condition. The third thing we looked at here was the centralized decision authority. As we noted previously, there's a significant efficiency in having a centralized decision authority, such as a school or park district. Although many religious organizations have centralized decision authorities, some do not. So this is something that you need to figure out as you look at engaging with a particular place of worship. Operation and maintenance capacity. So operation and maintenance capacity, both schools and parks tend to have this as a distinct function, maintenance function already built into their organization. And the maintenance function at places of worship tend not to be as strongly defined. And then capital access. For most projects, the owner will want to add enhancements to the stormwater features. So things like benches, play equipment, or pathways, for example. Schools and parks have dedicated capital funds so that they can tap into those and expend those funds on the types of things that enhance the project. Whereas places of worship often have to raise funds to add amenities to the project. So that can be more of a challenge for them. And then community reach. I'll turn this over to Sydney Van Kuren to talk a little bit about the community reach aspects.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon or hello to those of you who are on the Pacific Coast or Central Time, Mountain Time. I'm Sydney Van Kuren. I'm the Director of Planning at Greenprint and excited to jump in and add to Jim's engineering perspective in this section. So for community reach, there are a few points I'd like to make. The first is that from a physical perspective, these are publicly accessible sites. The public accessibility of the site presents an opportunity for greater community reach. They are generally open and welcoming community spaces. And there's also a social, a welcoming and community space feel to them as well, generally. And the second point is that these properties are community anchors, like April was mentioning at the beginning. They can often leverage the additional co-benefits that come from these GSI solutions beyond just the stormwater management benefits. And there are just a lot of opportunities to include some of those benefits into programming as well as updating their physical grounds. As community anchors, they're also typically looking to stay established and either, keep their roots or put down roots in their community. So there's more of a call to action for their surrounding neighbors. And importantly, they aren't as scared of any conservation easements or deed restrictions that, we might see in other private property types, since they really aren't planning on going anywhere. The third point I wanted to make here is that there's also a great opportunity to amplify climate benefits more broadly. And so if we are thinking about community reach from that perspective as well, they all have physical structures that could be also leveraged to combine and find synergies with other programs in the climate resilience space. For example, building electrification programs, decarbonization and renewable energy on site. Things like that to find some of those synergies for additional community reach. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Okay, as we go into these next few slides about specific opportunities and barriers for each type of landowner, I'd invite you to provide any questions or comments you may have in the chat for a Q&A session that we'll have a little later in the presentation. So go ahead and start adding some questions or comments in there as whatever strikes you as we talk through some of these things. So what's unique about schools? In the way we'll work this out, I'll give a couple of the programmatic or engineering related items, and then Sydney will jump in and touch on a couple of the engagement related and community related aspects of these each of these land types. So opportunities, if you go and look at most communities and do a search on who owns the most parcels acreage wise, it's often in the school district going to be in the top area, top number of acres owned. So they have a large number of acres of in generally impervious area. They have access to capital's funds, as we talked about, to augment the projects and make a good quality project for everyone. And then some of the barriers, they have some safety constraints that are heightened in a school setting. So standing water that is deep is not something that is desirable in a school environment. So you have to be concerned about that, as well as play surfaces. And this is one of the real challenges from an engineering standpoint, is the short summer construction windows. Most schools, you've got about 12 weeks over the summer to build something, and that's a pretty short time frame. And then, maintenance may or may not be within the school staff's expertise. And then one of the other problems or challenges that we have seen is that the district facility staff may or may not always be well connected with the local principal or teachers that are actually using the property on an individual site. So, making sure that is connected is something that's important. Sydney?
Yeah, from an engagement perspective, the educational opportunity that comes from being able to engage with schools is just wonderful. It's great to engage with all sorts of age groups, beanbag activities with young students, planting days to get them involved in design decisions, and increasing understanding of how nature-based solutions provide those co-benefits is just unmatched, right, with schools. And there's also usually a well-defined school community to conduct outreach and engagement with. Usually lots of other organizations that have already partnered with schools, or local parent groups, PTOs, local school councils, whatever the kind of local governance jurisdiction structure looks like, usually has some starting points, clear pathways to engage with the community. And green infrastructure often, aligns with the school's mission. Educators are often already familiar with benefits that a green schoolyard can bring to their students, and having access to outdoor spaces that can enrich and enhance the learning that's happening in the classroom. On the other hand, on the other side of that coin is that green infrastructure, GSI, does not always directly align with the school's mission, just in that, the primary role and job, of folks in the school system is to educate students. That's always going to be their priority. If things get in the way of that or feel tangential to those primary goals, then they can sometimes become not the priority.
Okay, so what's unique about parks? As noted previously, they don't generally have a significant amount of impervious area. So in a combined sewer area, they may not be the right fit, but they do have a lot of open space that would be great for an MS4 type area, where you're looking to find an open space where a large amount of stormwater can be treated. So they generally have large contiguous acreage to support those high volume aspects. They have existing landscape maintenance crews and equipment, and they also have a management system available to them for assets like this. So some of the barriers are that the increased costs that are associated with BMPs. Any increase in cost is often a challenge for all government entities, as we're probably all aware. Generally, there's not significant impervious areas within those park boundaries, as I said before. So really, you're looking at this to be a good solution in more of an MS4 type of an area. Sydney?
Yeah, so for engagement, park missions generally align with GSI. Adding natural areas in particular are usually part of what they're already trying to do. And the opportunity for passive recreation is great and something that is a huge opportunity and asset for expanding stormwater infrastructure within parks with that, human passive recreation component included. That said, there's also some displacement of other types of active recreation that might be occurring in those spaces. So really being thoughtful around articulating the trade-offs around that displacement. And there are a lot of primary users that parks have. Even sometimes there are, business vendors that operate in these parks or advocacy groups, schools even also can often overlap with parks. And plus general public. So the outreach becomes a little bit more complicated, a variety of messaging and more active outreach to a variety of different stakeholders becomes a more complicated effort, but definitely still worthwhile. Next
Okay, in places of worship. So typically they're large impervious parking areas. One of the real advantages here is that oftentimes they're combined with the parochial school. So you get the advantages of not only the place of worship, but also the school advantages. Some of the barriers to working with places of worship is that the decision-making authority is not always apparent. Sometimes that can feel like it's at the local level with a pastor or a committee at the local level. Sometimes it's at a higher level. And then the long-term maintenance risk and the capital to contribute to the project is limited. Both of those kind of go hand in hand with the idea that most places of worship are funded through donations. So they don't have a ability to raise funds outside of people donating to them. So if those donations fall off, there are challenges there, and a BMP maintenance and might not be the top priority when funds are tight.
And from an engagement perspective, again, strong alignment with kind of that stewardship mission. Faith-based organizations are, often have that stewardship alignment already in their value and care of the land, which are very much in line with the nature-based solutions in particular. And also from a kind of church community, generally well-defined through kind of membership, as well as their roles tend to be wanting to be good neighbors. And so there are usually already communication channels with key stakeholders that there can be activated through these programs for engagement.
Okay, next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if you want to engage with these different types of landowners, where do you start? What is the real message that seems to resonate with each of these different types of landowners? So as we've worked with each of the various types of properties, we've found the recurring themes around what resonates with them and what compels them to participate in a stormwater retrofit program. While each project is unique and many of the co-benefits of GS9 do resonate with different landowners, what we're showing here are the values that seem to be the highest value and really move them to participation. Many schools, particularly in urban areas, have playgrounds that are just a sea of asphalt. And if they do have landscaped areas, they often don't drain well and become unusable after rain events. So schools are really looking to refresh and update their play areas to be a more inviting and usable space for their students. Combining a stormwater project with a playground update is a way for schools to stretch their dollars. A good example of this was the transformation of a courtyard playground in South suburban Chicagoland. This school had a courtyard playground that was entirely asphalt, and under a stormwater program grant, we were able to remove the asphalt, install a stormwater storage area, and resurface the play yard with permeable rubber surface. The school received a refreshed play yard, and their only capital cost was for the installation of new playground equipment. For parks, we found that GSI offers them the opportunity to increase passive recreation areas. When BMPs can be located in naturally low-lying areas that are difficult to utilize for active recreation, they become an attractive option for parks. Under the Fresh Coast Green Communities program in the greater Milwaukee area, we were able to fund the biofiltration and engineered wetland to provide stormwater storage and treatment on a park site that is bordered by a walking trail and provides public access to the naturalized areas. And then the overarching theme that we've heard from places of worship, as Sydney talked about, when we work with them, is one of stewardship, the idea of stewardship. Time and again, we hear how stewardship of the environment is part of their mission or calling. At a Baptist church we worked with in St. Louis, they already had a green team before we talked with them about adding stormwater BMPs to their campus area. So that green team fully embraced the idea of adding nature-based practices that would reduce CSO events, and that team provides volunteer maintenance of the BMPs. So we found that tailoring messaging about green infrastructure to these types of landowners is the most effective way to engage with them. Sydney, I'll let you talk a bit about the community aspects that underlie engagement with each of these types of landowners.
Yeah, great. So the kind of biggest takeaway here is that from generating that kind of clear messaging and support from kind of a grassroots perspective can be really important across all of these landowner types. One of the biggest lessons learned across programs and projects for us is the value of really engaging with local community-based organizations and partners to early on to help identify the interested landowners that could be early adopters, the folks that are already kind of interested in these three values and that local partners have heard already are interested in advancing these types of goals. And that's, connecting with local neighborhood councils, business improvement districts, and other nonprofits that are well known and established in the community to start with kind of a listening to their local expertise and who they know and what their networks are revealing would be the best places to start across these three landowner types. And so we were able to see through using this approach ourselves a great uptick in folks interested in hearing more from the program and getting kind of engaged participants. And so starting with landowners who are already likely to be interested and using the warm introductions from those community partners can really improve program uptake and participation, but also lead to future ongoing relationships for future work and continued advancements of sustainability and stormwater goals throughout, moving forward beyond a specific project. So really getting neighbors and trusted partners to be, elevating the story of the program through a clear set of early conversations can be really valuable in kind of embedding and growing that community support in all three of these property types from the ground up.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sid and Jim, for sharing some prompts for reflection on these three property types. I'm really excited to see the level of engagement that is in the chat with folks sharing insights from your own experiences and working with schools, parks, and places of worship. Before we hop into our small group conversations, which we're going to do next, I just want to elevate some of the insights that are coming up through the chat. And focus first just a bit on schools. So Anne shared, Anne English, hi Anne, shared in the chat first that there's an opportunity for the property types to have kind of a broad impact across the watershed, because these property types tend to be distributed across the watershed, and also because of the kind of built-in diverse social infrastructure of these properties, that they allow for engaging a more diverse audience and improving our ability to reach folks from lots of different cultural, linguistic, and ethnic communities. And also shared that sometimes schools have to have their own MS4 permits that they need to meet. Nancy shared that they might have minimal stormwater management regulations. And that's that the two of them agreed that that is locally dependent or locality dependent. Tamar, who I believe is with Green Schoolyards America, shared that schools need / want to layer in the stormwater engineering alongside of play and education. So that's certainly something that we've seen. It's for every school property that we're working with. It's not only the opportunity to transform the landscape and the play experience of students, but an opportunity for integration with the educational work of that school, the STEM programs, et cetera. And shared that schools are an opportunity to reach that new generation, particularly if the facilities are integrated into the curriculum. And Daniel shared that they have seen the same issue happening at schools when parent groups change. So some of the changeover of leadership and changeover of ownership challenges that has happened when parent groups change, when you might have parent groups that have been spearheading the maintenance task of taking that on as a volunteer task. And also that any facilities that are being placed near play areas are not necessarily ones that you want to encourage interaction with. They may also have to have some kind of safety measures in terms of the materials that are selected, whether they're rocks that kids can pick up and throw. You don't want them picking up and throwing rocks, for example. But so there may be a need to limit play and compaction of the soils, et cetera. And so we'll invite the panel to speak to that after we get back from our small groups. And also shared that training park crews to properly maintain facilities is a challenge. Irene shared from Tucson Water, hi Irene, shared that there have been challenges with schools when the instructors or the principals change, and with staff who used to support the project are gone and no longer, then there's nobody now to take over that maintenance or to integrate a classroom program in for overseeing a rain garden installation, for example. And Stephanie shared that they've seen some strength in partnering with school and community stewardship groups, so putting school and community groups together to adopt the long-term stewardship of the rain garden that helps bring in outside volunteers outside of the school, in addition to supporting that maintenance and education work. Nancy from Montreal, hi Nancy, says, for parks, I would add the opportunity of multifunctionality in recreational spaces. Jiting, who is with HDR in Seattle, poses a question, Jim, for you to speak a bit more to stormwater parks, and particularly on why you think parks may not make as much sense in addressing CSO versus being appropriate for MS4 permit approaches. So Jim will just tee that one up for you to address after we get back from our small groups as well. Tyler shared that their local school had a stormwater practice that was added in front of the building, and educational signs have been put nearby to teach students walking by why it's important. And shared some limitations on the kind of mission alignment for faith-based groups. She says, even though stewarding the earth is a value for faith-based groups, it often falls lower than food bank missions, age of facilities upkeep, and the rotating cost of leadership. Faith-based champions typically really need a champion to guide it internally. And also shared that the National Wildlife Federation is a good partner for community work with faith-based groups with their Sacred Grounds program. So you can see that in the chat. There's a link there. Irene shared some examples from the University of Arizona, who developed a program to support public schools in GSI. There's a link there as well. And Stephanie shared Peninsula Streams and Shorelines, also has a similar schools partnership that puts GSI in the hands of community members. Tyler shared that parks could benefit greatly from encouraging GSI practices to replace some of the wide swaths of unused mown grass, which offers minimal drainage capacity and takes high level of manual labor and fuel consumption of landscaping vehicles, not to mention the noise pollution. And Anne strongly agreed with that. And then Daniel provided our last comment with a link to nature patches in Portland parks. And Nature Patches has integrated this idea to great success with the public absolutely loving those areas. However, there are additional maintenance considerations. So just wanted to put that all in your brains as you head into your small group conversation. Imagine this is sparking lots of discussion and thoughts for all of you. So we're going to spend about 20 minutes in small group conversation. So we're going to move now into a bit of a panel discussion. And if you don't mind bringing back up our slide to just introduce our panel here. And as we introduce the panel, also want to invite folks to share some of the key insights, folks who are in the small group conversations, to share some of the key insights that were coming up through your conversation, or anything that's just been kind of hanging out in the back of your mind that you feel it would be helpful to add to the conversation for the benefit of other participants or for elevation in the panel discussion. So just want to invite folks to take about a minute or so to pop into the chat a key insight or key question that came out for you from either the small group conversation or something that's just been hanging out in the back of your mind that you would like to share. With a conversation around maintenance in particular, and how you think about design for maintenance and responsibility, assigning responsibility for maintenance and preparing folks to be able to effectively do the maintenance. And would invite Alex Heidke and Peter Graves on the Greenprint team. Alex is our engineering manager, and Peter Graves is the director of our landscape architecture practice, to share some opening insights there. And then invite Jim and Sid if the two of you have anything that you would like to add as well. So Alex, can you kick us off?
Sure can. Thanks, April. Yeah, I think obviously, maintenance is something that comes up pretty much every time we talk about green infrastructure. It is something that I don't know that we've really solved the issue of yet. It's something that we're always fighting against with, the landowners, with people in the neighborhood who see things, all of that. So I think something that, we've learned throughout the years is to really make sure that we are coordinating with the folks that are going to be doing the maintenance at the end of the project and, sustaining the facility for the rest of time, right? And determining, what level of maintenance they're capable of and, how does that impact the final design of the system? Does that mean that, we need to right size the amount of plants that are getting planted in the space? Do we need to think about the number of species that are going in to make it simpler so people have an easier handle on identifying what plants should be there and what plants shouldn't? Do we need to work with certain groups? For example, at schools, we've worked with like the Green Team before, who is a club that the students had created that can kind of be champions of the project and can not necessarily maintain it all the time, but keep eyes on it so that there are folks who are paying attention to it and calling it out if there is maintenance needed. I think it's definitely, a big thing to be concerned about, and it's something that we're going to keep running into, especially because we talked about, that institutional knowledge loss when, the maintenance director or the principal or the teacher that was the main leader of the charge, right, leaves, and then there's a lack of knowledge of how to maintain these systems. So, we can develop maintenance manuals, we can provide videos, but if that knowledge doesn't get transferred, then, it's lost and these systems can get hurt by it. So, Peter?
Yeah, I think we all have examples of, native gardens or rain gardens that we install, and they're beautiful for the first year, and then you come back 3 years later to visit the site and it's turf or it's been mowed over. So I think there's a balance for us to play as designers between education, which is really obviously important and something we've been talking about, but also design and just understanding how we can do a better job of designing these places to make them very obvious that they're rain gardens, that they're special places, even providing educational, informational signage on site. And one thing we like to do as landscape architects is to kind of try to limit the amount of plant species that we're using, and to also come in planting as big as we can with the size of the containers on day one, or the size of the plants on day one, so that we're kind of limiting, we're helping to control the weed, and limiting the amount of weeding we have to do. And we're ideally setting these places up to be sort of self-sustaining, so that we don't require a lot of intensive maintenance from, the teachers or the parents who are going to have to come in and volunteer. But, worst case scenario, if they don't touch it for a year, is it still going to be recognizable? And so those are the things we're keeping in mind.
Yeah, I think another thing that we've been doing recently too is just providing the whoever it is you're working with, the landowner, with maintenance providers as well, and specifically like ecological restoration companies, as opposed to just like typical landscape companies, because a lot of times we're finding that, maybe a church does already use, a landscaper to come out and manage the rest of their site, but those folks don't necessarily understand or have they been trained on what needs to happen for this area, separate from, the rest of the site. And they're not seeing the same people come out every time. And so if you, aren't able to train the people who are already doing your work, maybe hiring someone for the first couple of years, while that is an initial investment, does help pay off in the long term, because you've given those plants a chance to get large enough that they are kind of beating out the weeds and, like Peter said, becoming self-sustainable.
Thank you. So I'd love to see if there's anybody on the call who has some insights to share on how to manage the successful transition to long-term maintenance, and deal with the changeover of ownership around that long-term maintenance, and also how to get funding for long-term maintenance. If you have any particularly insightful breakthroughs there that you'd like to share, I'd love to just have you raise your hand. Lisa Sasso. Yes,
I was
please.
wondering if you were going to raise your hand.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Sasso. I'm with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. MMSD has community-based public-private partnership programs that Greenprint works with us on. And one creative way that we are able to fund maintenance in that program, as we call it, vegetation establishment. So within that program, we fund the green infrastructure. Greenprint does all of the design and bidding of construction, and then MMSD pays for the first 5 years of maintenance. So we're hoping that really helps get that project established before it goes into the property owner's hands. Greenprint will do kind of a tutorial with that property owner of how to maintain it, and whatever contractor was maintaining that site could also be available for hire. So there is kind of that continuity of that as well. And Jim, if you want to speak any more on that, feel free. But that's one way that MMSD has gotten around maintenance. We still have other programs that don't have it built in that we have to figure out, but our newest GI programs, we're building in the maintenance cost for 5 years.
Yeah, Lisa, and we're really excited about that aspect. And just to see what the end result of that is. We're year 2, or I think on the maintenance at this point, so we've got a little ways to go. But I think we're all hopeful that it will make an impact on a long-term basis. But unfortunately, we need to wait for time to pass to really tell. So.
Great, thank you. Anne.
Yeah, in Montgomery County, the publicly funded projects on private property, I'll use schools as an example, and the right-of-way is the second example, but because the maintenance was being shifted in schools to the schools, but there was a split, but there was a delay based on the construction, so the contracts got rewritten so that substantial completion of all the hardscape could be paid for. And then the plants were the plantings were in a separate contract. And that really helped ensure that from day one, somebody was caring for it. Because a lot of times things fell into disrepair before the permits were closed, and because no one was doing the maintenance, because they were going to wait till the end, right before their requirement was met, to just throw in some plants, and so nothing was established. So that really helped and drive down the cost of maintenance over time on these publicly funded projects. They did our maintenance group trained the crew, contracted through the department, but they would go out and they would, as a courtesy, train crews to make sure that things would not be mowed down inappropriately, weeded out inappropriately, or neglected. And then we do, that was the nice thing about being in a large county with a good budget. Some of these projects helped. And then the third thing was using our local regional training program, which developed through the Chesapeake Professional Program. They got trained through workshops on that. So that increased the number of professionals in an industry where there's a lot of turnover, that were aware of how to properly maintain, so that when a congregation or a school went to hire somebody, they could find qualified candidates. So those all helped.
Really helpful insights. Thank you so much, Anne. It looks like we've got about 5 minutes left, and I know we have a little bit of wrap up to do. Tracy, could you let me know if you need about 5 minutes to do that wrap up? Does that sound right?
I need about 90 seconds.
Okay, well, if you need 90 seconds, I'm going to take the last 3.5 minutes for one more question, which is on building buy-in, particularly around the question of the use of public funds on private properties. So would love to invite folks again to raise your hand if you feel like you have some good insight into how your jurisdiction has been able to kind of make the case for using public funds on private properties for these kinds of retrofits. Yes, the Rachel crew. Yeah, we'll get you off mute. Okay.
That's all right. We couldn't find the hand anywhere. So.
Just got to use our actual hands.
Nice.
So we are in Southeast Michigan. We work for the county where Ann Arbor is located, Washtenaw County. And most of what our team does is maintaining existing green infrastructure, although we do some construction. We have constructed on church properties, so that's private property. But then we have been able to create what we call a drain easement on top of that new rain garden. And then we'll add that area to our drain. So our drains are either enclosed pipes or creeks. And we have been able to make the case that this green infrastructure is helping to soak in water before it gets into that drain or creek. And it's helping, of course, with water quality and then also flood reduction. So we're able to then charge long-term maintenance to the drain, and everybody that is in the drainage district or like a creek shed of that drain pays a small apportionment to it. So it's like a small fee, maybe $10 per property owner per year. It's really a small amount. So everybody in a sense is contributing, and then the long-term maintenance is secure forever.
Fascinating.
This we're saying this only works on county drains. So within the city of Ann Arbor, there are no county drains. That's all city of Ann Arbor stormwater system. So there's limitations to this strategy, but we've been able to make some pretty great projects on church properties with this strategy.
Got it.
And we are the County Water Resources Commissioner's Office, so that's how we've been able to do that.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. So Tracy, I think I've given you 90 seconds at this point. I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, April. Thank you to everyone from Greenprint today, and thank you to all of our participants for being part of this conversation.